this past week?
Yeah, last week.
Tuesday? Yeah, Tuesday.
Might have been.
Here, let's do this. They had a pretty hive though.
Oh, it was beautiful.
It was a beautiful hive.
We were filming in 360 degrees now, so we're able to take that 360 degree camera and put it in. And people watching, that's like, here's the security of the whole safe camera. It's like very cool.
They didn't give me much of a
Well,
tutorial. They're like, here's the keys, it's over there.
Do you want to move?
What's
Okay.
going on here?
So this microphone, in order to use it,
Well,
you have
we're
to
live.
constantly press it, the on button, where these will stay on.
Gotcha. So is the podium just gonna be there?
Yeah.
So
So do you want?
I might scoot the table a little bit.
Okay.
So what I would recommend is, if you loosen this up, then you can
Or do
swivel.
you want it kind of this way, move your chair?
Between speaking and video.
Or where you put it up?
If you'd like to.
You know, you can kind of,
Now, did you get
but
your
yeah, if you need to,
presentation?
Yes.
you know.
Yep.
And that's it. The bottom's the capture, and then these are the live streams.
Could you just stand behind the podium?
And that's what it is. Hey everybody, thanks for being with us. We'll get started here shortly. We are doing an educational lecture for first responders at the Benson city. What is this building? City Hall?
Council chambers.
The council
City council
chambers.
chambers.
Yeah, the city council chambers in Benson, Arizona.
So I don't know if you're a wanderer.
Reed is going to start talking here shortly. We're going to give a PowerPoint presentation,
I don't know if you're a wanderer.
but we just decided to go ahead and get the live streams going now.
That's why I said it's gonna be hard.
Feel free to come and go.
Yeah. Yeah. You are changing. Because that's the only microphone that stays on.
Okay.
Yeah.
Never mind.
I was gonna say why.
I'll just pick the podium up.
So for it.
And we switched
So should we go ahead and get going?
I guess so, yeah, we may as well.
Okay.
Somebody struggles. I think you with the program.
Thank you to all three of you who came.
Is that loud enough?
Do you guys like want to move up a little bit?
I'm good right now, because I got perfect,
Or are you escape mechanism-y?
yeah,
Okay.
Yeah, if we have a call, we don't want to disrupt the rest of the
disrupt the
crowd.
rest of the crowd, so.
I got you. Well, and that's what the other crew was here, and then they had to leave, because they had to go cover Central.
Yeah.
Well, hopefully they'll be back.
Hopefully they'll be fine. All right, so you guys let me know when we're good to go. This
If
is
you
not
get
on
called
yet.
for bees, let us know.
Yeah.
Yeah,
We know some folks.
Yeah.
We don't need all that other stuff on there. Yeah. You guys let me know when you're good to go. I'll push the microphone. All right. All right, good morning, afternoon, everyone. All right, thank you for coming. Today we're going to be hosting a presentation by Reed Booth, also known as the Killer Bee Guy. And for those of you who are tuning in live stream, thank you very much, both to the public and to any first responders that might be tuning in on the live stream. So for those of you who are wanting to take, I'm going to do a little bit of housekeeping here first. So any of those who want to take this for credit for your CEs, what you need to do is email me your email address stating that you attended this presentation, and my email address is cchildress, so it's CHILD as in David, RESS as in Sam, at hciaz.com. And that email address will also be, once we get to the medical portion of this presentation, my email address will be there as well. For those who are taking in for CEs, you will have to take, it's horrible, a 5-question quiz following the presentation, and then I will be sending you a certificate for attending. agendas. So that's how we're going to do that through the live stream today. If you have any questions, you can email me at that email address. I'll be checking it fairly frequently throughout the presentation as well. All right. So at this time, I'm going to introduce Reed Booth, and he's going to do a way better job of introducing himself than I am.
Thank you, Kathy. Thank you. Hi, everyone, and everyone out there in the live stream land. All right. If you, as you know, if you're watching us live stream, we're live on YouTube, TikTok, and Facebook at this point, and we're also capturing. So we will be posting shorts of this presentation, and we're going to keep the education going. All right. This is kind of a new segue. It's not new segue, but it's a branching out segue for education with our first responders and our medical personnel as to what to do with these killer bees, with these Africanized bees. So again, I'm Reed Booth. We have Leah on our camera action back there, who is behind the camera, so you don't see her. We have Hosh, of course. You guys know Hosh from the removals. And we're going to be doing a deep dive into the Africanized honeybee. It is a fascinating subject, it's a deadly subject, and it's a pertinent subject because they're everywhere and they're not going away. So we have to know how to deal with them, we have to know how to not interact with them, actually. We can't live with them. That's what it boils down to. So we're going to be getting our slideshow going here, and just kind of a little bit about the state of it, of course, not the bees, well, yes, the bees. So let's go ahead and, go ahead and get the next one going now. Just general info, we're going to be doing some background, a little history, current events, even a little bit of biology and facts about the killer bee, about honeybees, okay? Because killer bees, Africanized bees are honeybees. They are honeybees. Now, of course, people have had a relationship with honeybees for thousands of years. They are in the insect order Hymenoptera, which means membranous or married wings, all right? Some very simple stuff here. All bees, not just honeybees, all bees function as pollinators, which is going to be very important about something we're going to go into in a little bit about invasive and native pollinators. And of course, people have been collecting honey ever since that first person climbed up a tree, got stung up, and found the honey and went, this is good. So this has been around 10,000 years that we know of. The Egyptian people have been domesticating honeybees for thousands of years, and it's ongoing, of course. Bee basics, when people started domesticating honeybees from the wild, they chose them for traits, all right? So, when they store the honey, that first one there, ability to survive periods, well, where they store the ultimate survivalists is what they are. Where they store the honey and the pollen, that's their pantry. And the honey never ever goes bad, so they can survive prolonged periods. They can survive cold weather, resistance to disease, and this is why the Africanized honeybee was created. We'll go into that more. Less aggressiveness, they're less likely to swarm as wild hives. And so they used to work with smoke. Everybody says to us, why don't you use smoke? We used to with European honeybees. Africanized honeybees don't care. We'll go into that more too. So here in the Americas, now this is kind of interesting. In fact, it's very interesting because when we think of honeybees, everyone says save the bees. Which bees, right? Are we going to include invasive species? No, we're not. We shouldn't anyway. Well, honeybees are invasive to the Western Hemisphere. You see that first one there? All species of stinging honeybee alive today are invasive to the Americas, to the Western Hemisphere. The honeybees we used to love and cherish were called European honeybees. Never heard of an Alabama honeybee or a Latin American honeybee or a Southwestern honeybee? No, European. They're invasive to the Western Hemisphere, all right? And so, people always wonder, well, wait a minute, because there were no honeybees in the state of Arizona before 1872, ever. So how did people survive? Well, they didn't have honey. Okay, that goes without saying, but how did the plants survive? We have our native pollinators, all right, native pollinators. Most of them solitary, and they do not stand a chance against these, especially Africanized honeybees. That's what we're going to be focusing on here, not European. Africanized honeybees, which are not only an invasive species, but a deadly invasive species. And they're better at everything. And so they are no match against these invaders. They're Vikings, basically. Solitary bees live in wood or burrow underground. They're better pollinators, about 30% better than honeybees, because they have a relationship with those flowers, which I'm going to turn this over to Ocean in a second here, so that he can expound on that, because it's a fascinating study. And they're like I was saying, they're specialists, all right, pollinators of certain plants. So they're non-aggressive, which is a whole different thing than what we're dealing with these Africanized. So you want to take over here, Ocean,
Sure.
explain a little bit more about
Yeah.
that?
But so generally, thanks to popular programming, we have collectively kind of honeybees have a good reputation. They prop up big agriculture. So we have to make the distinction from a conservationist perspective: agriculture benefits, ecosystem benefits, right? And the two are often not compatible. Humans are just trying to survive. And in our case, out in California, we do this through what? Not just California, but many places we do this through monocropping. You have huge swaths of one particular species of plant, and we don't have the native bees to keep up with it, so they bring honeybees in. And this is where you get the kind of statistics, which, by the way, are inflated. Every 1/3 of, every third bite of your food, thank a honeybee. Well, honeybees are propping up the big agriculture, which, fuels Safeway. But aside from that, really bad news for ecosystems. And I don't want to talk environment, because what is that? Are we talking about the burgeoning suburbs of Sierra Vista? In any environment, and this is an environment, so we have to think ecosystem. Very complex, system with a lot of moving parts all at once. There are 4,000 species, approximately 4,000 species of native bees in North America alone. These bees evolved here along with our native plants, and they're designed lock and key to pollinate these native plants. The way that honeybees pollinate, they're generalists. This means a couple things. First of all, they're scattered. They're all over the place. They're going to do a little here, a little there, a little here, a little there. They wet pack pollen in the hive. So when we open up a hive and we see a bunch of pollen, where is that pollen not? It is not in the ecosystem. It is not supporting our native plants. Additionally, honeybees inbreed native plants. This has been shown in research, okay? Now, people tend to check out when it comes to all of this stuff, but if you do the research, you don't have to dig very deep before you get to this stuff. Inbreeding native plants, they don't take the pollen far enough away from the original plant, and consequently, all these plants are mixing with the plant right next to them, as opposed to our native bees, which tend to take the pollen farther away. In short, when it comes to our native bees, we're talking about a more robust biodiversity. If you've got one species doing everything, then that's going to decrease the biodiversity, and the system becomes fragile, because it doesn't have the inbuilt adaptability to move and change with environmental conditions. So the bottom line is that we've been told over and over again, we need the bees. We do, as Americans living in an American ecosystem, we need America's native bees. None of those are honeybees. Honeybees were first introduced to the Americas in the 1600s. 1622, the first honeybee colonies arrived in Jamestown via whatever ships were coming over. And from there, they spread out. By 1789, they were found feral in Maine. And we want to make a distinction, too, between kept honeybee hives and feral honeybee hives. No one is dependent upon feral honeybees for their food. Feral honeybee, it's like a cow that got loose, right? Except there's thousands and thousands of them. Additionally, your kept honeybees, that's what's propping up the big agriculture. Additionally, your honeybees, they're spreading diseases. Honeybees are notorious for carrying disease, which they will then share with native species of bees. And so their numbers go into decline, competing with native bees for resources. So people say, oh, well, there are no more native bees. Well, that's because there's literally about 1 billion honeybees in a place where 500 years ago there were no honeybees. There are 2.8 million honeybee hives in North America right now that were never here before 1622. So this is a problem, and what we're talking about is that the pollination cycle, which is very sensitive, is disrupted. Every time they've brought honeybees into an area, it immediately disrupts the pollination cycle. In the Canary Islands, researchers introduced honeybees to see what would happen from a research perspective. They went in, they brought bee boxes, they set them up. Within a day, the pollination cycle was disrupted. And the longer that those honeybees spent time there, the worse the situation got. Now, it's not to say that everything's going to turn to desert, but what we are going to see is more and more native species going extinct. That's a problem. And we see more and more invasive species brought in. Honeybees, by and large, are really great at pollinating invasive species of plants. Here, things like mesquite and desert broom, all of these things, they're not supposed to be here, and the honeybees are spreading them. So that's an example of that.
Yeah, and so, get back to my microphone here. So along with being an invasive species, as we'll see from the next, we went through a couple of the slides. The next one shows how adaptable they are now. Honeybees never ever used to live underground, ever. And I think this next video shows that underground hive. We'll go ahead and start that. You can just see how we dug around there.
Took a while.
Well,
Winter and cold and weird out, so try to see if we can get any comb under here just to show what they do underground even. Oh, there it is. There's the honey. Yep, pick this up. And look at the bees in there, honey.
Oh, look how pretty. You put the light with the light on it, it looks really
Look
good.
at that. Look at that. Wow, we absolutely found it, didn't we?
Do you get them in the ground very often?
No, one serious spot. If they're in the ground, they're like in an old tire or in an old box or in an old septic tank, but they're going to see some shit. 90% of the hives that we had last season were near in hell, right, huh?
Yeah.
All right. Yeah, I don't think any of them were like this. Let's take the top layer up. Now we're trying to figure out, there you go, perfect. And grab this, pull that up. And look at that. There we go.
Ooh, and it's
Look how
black.
dark, look at how old.
Oh.
Isn't that beautiful? Yeah, let's go ahead and, so this is underground, and they will live underground. They won't dig a hole, but they'll take advantage of an existing hole. Oh, that didn't, this is all root commissary, but this is just cool. So let me see if we'll go back this way now. Oh, look at that. Holy, we have to show her that. Don't break it apart. Leave that hole. Yeah, that's beautiful. The guys that were weed whacking down here in the city or whoever didn't get attacked. We'll keep looking.
So these developments that these bees are showing, as far as adaptability goes, that's what we're getting at here with this. Honeybees never used to live underground. There's a lot of behavior that the Africanized honeybee is changing the way that we think about honeybees. Everything from building underground, they'll go into rodent burrows and kick out the rodents or kill them and obviously build underground. 10 years ago, this would have been total science fiction. That would not have even been possible. And there's a lot of other instances where these Africanized honeybees are changing the way we think about it, mainly in aggression. Now our native pollinators, we've got a pile of them. In fact, I think in the northern Sonora Desert here we have about 1,400, something like that, 1,100 different species of native pollinators. That includes bumblebees, leaf cutters, diggers, sweat bees, mason bees. But an interesting little fact that just came to our attention recently was because of Africanized honeybees, there are no more bumblebees in Tucson.
they have made them go extinct in Tucson because of Africanized honeybee. A deadly invasive species, those 3 words, right? So let's go ahead and keep rotating there, because we have a lot of different native pollinators, and that's what we're trying to save here. Now, this is such a fascinating thing, because before the early 1600s, there were no honeybees in the United States or the Western Hemisphere. And you can see the progression. They came into California first because of the gold rush, 1850. Arizona, 1872. People brought them with them, brought their hives with them on wagons, on covered wagons. And so we're stressing heavily that they are an invasive species, and they don't belong here. And now, of course, we didn't really pay any attention to that before, when they were nice and warm and fuzzy and didn't try to kill us and gave us honey. But now that they are obviously killing us, our animals, and now we're paying more attention to how they affect our native environment, which brings us to this video, which was not produced by us, but it is an excellent video regarding the state of it's titled, "We're Saving the Wrong Bees." So please enjoy this, and this is the best professional presentation I've ever seen on this. Go ahead with that.
They're weird, fuzzy, and in a lot of trouble. These insects are actually all bees, wild ones, and they're debatably more important than the honey-making kind. People are really worried about bees.
Take the plight of the honeybee for granted and have a no.
But what most people don't know, honeybee numbers are increasing worldwide. Not just that, but the way humans use honeybees makes them a problem. Putting a honeybee hive in your backyard doesn't help, because we're saving the wrong bees. Animals are involved in the pollination of 90% of the world's flowering plants. And when you think of pollinators, the honeybee probably comes to mind. That's because honeybees and humans have an ancient relationship. Bees have been managed for thousands of years.
There's a lot of evidence that it played an important role also in the ancient cultures in Egypt and in Greece. And so beekeeping has always been very widespread.
Axel is the chair of the Invertebrate Conservation Committee at the IUCN. Honeybees are native to Asia, Europe, and Africa, but nowadays are everywhere except Antarctica. Apis mellifera is the most common honeybee and the best studied, although there are another 10 known species. They're general pollinators, meaning they will pollinate most plants. And although honeybees are at risk from pests and disease, the number of colonies worldwide is actually growing. According to the FAO, managed hives have increased worldwide by 83% since 1961.
Because they're always managed by the beekeepers and also receive veterinary treatment and so on, there's no risk that they will become extinct.
But honeybees aren't the only bees.
The general public confounds bees with the honeybee.
This is Isabel, a pollination ecology researcher specializing in urban environments.
It would be the same situation if, for example, you were talking about birds and people think that when you talk about birds, you talk about chicken.
There are around 20,000 different species of wild bees, and they are the most important wild pollinators. They're mostly solitary, and unlike honeybees, are suited to specific plants, which makes them much better at pollinating. A hectare of apples, for example, would require tens of thousands of honeybees to pollinate, but only hundreds of this wild bee, because Osmia cornuta is particularly good at apple pollination.
Each flowering plant is strongly connected to a pollinator that fits accordingly to the lock and key principle.
An entomologist by training, Sabrina is a project manager at the Research Institute of Organic Agriculture.
This perfect fit between flower and its selected pollinator is the product of an ongoing co-evolution for centuries that is still operating.
Like the squash bees native to Central and South America. They're perfectly suited to squash plants. They're early risers, and squash flowers are only open early in the morning, while the honeybees are still asleep. Don't like squash? How about tomatoes, potatoes, or eggplant? These crops also need wild pollinators, loud ones like bumblebees to be precise. Their flowers require a vibrating buzz to release their pollen, something a bumblebee perfectly provides. Honeybees just don't have that skill. But wild bees are in serious decline. And this doesn't only affect them and their ecosystems, but our food security as well. Worldwide, wild bee diversity has been decreasing each year since the 1990s. Pesticides, intensive agriculture, and especially habitat loss are main drivers. A recent study found that we may have already lost a quarter of wild bee species, but assessment is hard due to the lack of global data. Various regional estimates suggest over 40% of wild bee and butterfly species are threatened. Farmers are already noticing a difference.
When they walked along a field, everything was full of pollinators. And nowadays it's more like everything is calmed down and nobody knows where they are.
This loss of diversity can cause knock-on effects on whole ecosystems. Less pollinator diversity means fewer wild plants. This can hurt animals that use them for food or shelter. And it's also bad for the future of our food.
The yield of cultivated plants is higher when they are visited by a variety of pollinators compared to when they are visited by only honeybees.
Remember Osmia cornuta, the apple specialist?
Most of the pollination of apple trees is performed by several species of wild bees. So if you don't get these wild bees, you get a crop of apples that will be reduced.
US crops are already producing less due to wild pollinator decline. And globally, we're planting more and more of the crops that require animal pollination, like fruits, vegetables, and oilseeds. The increase in honeybees hasn't kept up. This means pollinator dependence has increased around 70% since 1961. And combined with the decline in wild pollinators, means an emergency for the global food supply. This is especially true in countries with many large monocultures that destroy wild pollinator habitats, like China and the United States. Not only that, the way we use honeybees actually makes them a part of the problem. According to the American Beekeeping Federation, 2/3 of the 2.7 million honeybee colonies in the US are used for pollination. Most go to the almond fields in California, where 80% of the world's almonds come from. Then bees rotate around the country to pollinate other crops. Nowhere else in the world uses honeybees for pollination like the US, but the trend is growing in Europe too as wild pollinators disappear. Unfortunately, it's not so good for the honeybees. They can be exposed to pesticides from the crops or catch diseases from the other colonies. And these honeybees are also a threat to wild ones.
Within a honeybee hive, you have tens of thousands of individuals that need a lot of food. They will eat most of the floral resources, and there will not be enough left for the other pollinating species.
If you have many bees, then they will probably outcompete this native species very fast.
Honeybees can also spread disease to wild bees. An infected bee can leave some virus on a flower to be picked up by the next wild bee that visits. It's not the honeybee's fault, but Save the Bees definitely does not mean adding more into the environment.
There have been a lot of people that thought that they could only save the bees when having their own beehive in the backyard. And that's the wrong way to conserve pollinators.
So what's the right way? Industrial agriculture is the biggest threat to all bees. It uses harmful chemicals and relies on huge fields of one crop. Ideally, we change our whole food system, but on a personal level, supporting small-scale sustainable farmers, if viable, also supports diverse habitats for wild bees. Even more can be done with the backyard, like leaving native plants alone or planting new ones. Open, sunny ground or dead logs also make great breeding spots for wild bees. But most of all, they need more attention. We need honeybees but aren't in danger of losing them. With wild bees, it's another story.
Did you have any idea wild bees were that cool? I'm in love with Osmia cornuta. That apple bee, it's so cute. Anyway, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to our channel. We've got new ones every Friday.
They're weird.
Yeah, saving the wrong bees. Interesting, huh? So how did we get ourselves into the mess we're in now with the Africanized, which is man-made, created, yes, by that gentleman there actually, at the request of the Brazilian government. In 1957, he went to South Africa to procure pure African queen bees, South African queen bees, so that he could crossbreed them with European honeybees. Why the heck would he want to do that? Well, of course, he didn't know he was going to get the worst bee in the world. They just wanted to have more honey production and a disease-resistant bee, because the European honeybee in jungle conditions is a very poor producer and very weak, and you got to read them bedtime stories and everything. It's a pain in the ass. So he crossbred them. And they're called Africanized because the dominant gene is the African gene. That's the only reason. It's a scientific thing, all right? Well, here we go again. Yeah, they're a better producer and everything. Now, the reason why it sounded like a good idea, because Brazil wanted to be a player on the world honey scene, and my gosh, they are. And it worked in that, respect. But what happened then? Yeah, they were quarantined, of course, because the doctor, Warwick Kerr, was a responsible scientist. He was a responsible man. And there are ways that we can keep bees from swarming, which is nature's way of propagating the area of bees. You've got a hive of European honeybees, about 50,000 bees, although that's doubled now with the Africanization. An average hive has 100,000 bees in it. So you've got 50,000 bees. 10 or 20% of the bees take off, go find a new place to live. You still have your own hive, all right? Now there's ways we can prevent them from doing that. We have screens at the entrance of the hive to prevent that queen from wriggling out, because she's bigger than the rest of the hive, rest of the bees. To prevent her from wriggling out, taking 10 or 20% of the bees with her and going and find a new place to live. We're preventing that. Well, the assistant didn't get the memo. Yeah, it was a stupid accident. Oh my goodness, the good doctor went to a conference in Sao Paulo or something, and this new assistant saw the screens on the entrances to the hive and thought, oh, those bees are having trouble getting out of there, I'll help them. And he pulled the screens off, and I have a job. And that's how they got out. Unbelievable. Something that ridiculous. They had no idea what their temperament was going to be, and they've been changing over the years also. We'll be going into that. So they spread it out about 300 miles a year in every direction, well, south and west from Brazil. That ain't too much, but north, long way to go. They actually tried to stop them at the Isthmus of Panama, but couldn't, because you know why? These damn things hitchhike. Yeah, that's right. They hitchhike on boats, planes, automobiles, trains, ships, whatever. They came into Texas in about 1990, into Arizona in 93. And, we used to send samples up to the laboratories in Tucson at their request, Department of Ag, et cetera, in the early and mid-90s for testing a percentage of Africanization, because everybody was going like, what the hell's going on here? What's going on with these bees? Where are they? What's the percentage of feral hives? And we sent hundreds and hundreds of samples. We had little vials and everything. Anybody that had anything to do with honeybees at that time in southern Arizona sent them up there. 1998, they called up all of us and said, don't send any more samples. We're throwing them away. They're all Africanized. It's not going the other way. It's done. This is way back then, 1998. All right, it's not been getting any better, that's for sure, as everyone knows that has to deal with them at all. And of course, there was a stinging incident in New Hampshire in 2018. They killed a beekeeper in Connecticut. So they adapt, like I was saying, they adapt readily, and they're going north. Now, we're going to go into a little bit of the differences in the beehive itself. As everyone knows, we got a worker and a drone and a queen, and they all have their specific jobs. The drones are males, all right? They don't serve any purpose at all other than reproduction. And they literally are sacrificed during the winter months. They get kicked out of the hive to reduce the numbers in the hive, less mouths to feed. And so, go ahead a little bit further with this, Osha. I want to show everybody that they actually create their own wax in the hive. This is just total science fiction for me, because they have to eat about 7 pounds of their own honey to create 1 pound of wax. They distill it in their own bodies You can see the flakes on that V on the lower right there. That's actually beeswax that they produce. And they take it into their mouths and masticate it and start forming it into the six-sided cells that we know that are a honeybee hive. Now, every empty cell in a beehive is like a canning jar for bees. Every single one. They use it, they fill it up with honey, they'll put a cap on it, and then during the winter when they need it, they take the cap off, eat the honey, and we'll do it again next year. Each cell can be used for one of three things, and that's either raising babies, honey storage, or pollen storage. Now, here's capped honey, and this is what it looks like. On the lower right, that's honey that's actually nectar that has not been turned into honey. When they collect the nectar from the flowers and bring it back to the hive, it can take them up to a month to turn it into honey. It's quite a process of using enzymes from their honey sac, for their honey stomach, and dehydration. So there's three sections in the hive. The first one was honey. This is where they store the pollen. And then we have the brood comb. That's where they raise the babies. So those are the three sections in the hive. Now, the drone cells are three different sizes. The queen cells you see on the lower left, those are the huge ones. That's where the queens are born. And there's very few queens. In fact, in a normal hive, there's only one queen for 100,000 bees. But that's been changing also over the years. And with really huge hives, we've been seeing 2 and more queens. More science fiction, unheard of stuff. The worker cells and the drone cells, the drone bees, the males, go ahead, another one, Bush. The males are bigger and they can't even sting. Their rear ends are only good for one thing. So anyway, swarming honeybees. Now, of course, anybody in this room or anybody that's watching has seen a swarm of honeybees like this. This is, again, nature's way of propagating the area with bees. And they will take off, go find a new place to live, and start their own hive, at which time they're their own entity. They don't belong to that old hive at all anymore. In fact, in the field, every hive is an enemy of every other hive. So nature's way of propagating the area with bees. Now, anybody that's lived down in Cochise County or southern Arizona has heard of or seen bell boxes full of bees. They just love to live. They'll live anywhere, but they love to. The variety of places that they'll live is kind of astounding, actually. And as far as more weird behavior goes, this next short video here shows an anomaly. I mean, a total anomaly. You're going to see one hive here, one swarm, not even a hive. They came, I don't even know where they came from, to be honest with you. But you're going to see one swarm of millions of bees. This, I've never seen anything like that. Yeah, go ahead. That is one swarm, solid as bees. It's like they all landed in a half an hour.
It's a small one here.
There's a swarm here, right? They covered the trunk. Hi, Jim!
So that's not a hive, that's just a swarm.
That's just a swarm. There is no comb. The difference between a hive and a swarm, right here, that millisecond they decided. They're here. That was a swarm. That's the executive. I have no idea what was going on here. That flew by. Total science fiction. Never seen anything since like it. Look at this.
Outside of his bee has an invisible.
Could we get a big garbage bag or two out of the back of the literally millions of honeybees. Scooping them into Africanized honeybees. Look at this, Joe. This is solid bees. Look at this. That is solid bees from up there down. Feel it. Put your hand under there.
Oh, wow.
Put your hand under there.
I am.
No, on my hand.
Wow. Okay, that's my hand. And this feels like I'm holding a small bag of sugar. Kind of.
Like a what?
Small bag of sugar.
Look at that. Don't care. I mean, this is insane. Oh, they're all going in there. That is absolutely terrifying view right there. Because it only takes 500 stings to equal a rattlesnake bite. Yeah, there's enough bees there to kill 1,000 horses. It's absolutely insane. Never seen anything like it since, and that's just fine with me, actually. So, again, nature's way of propagating the area with the bees. The old queen leaves with the new swarm. The swarm is leaving. She's already been on her mating flight.
all right? There are three things that are not in the hive. There's no bathroom, there's no boudoir, and there's no cemetery. So there's no shitting in the hive, no sex, and no burying their dead. They take the dead out, all right? So that queen has to go on a mating flight. Now, a virgin queen in your old hive is hatched after that old queen takes that 10 or 20% of the bees out to start a new trailer park over there somewhere. And any queen that is hatched first in that hive will go and kill the other queens that are about to be hatched. It's brutal. It's just brutal. So that she will take over the hive. Now, she has to go on a mating flight. This is where your nice European, still invasive, your nice European honeybee hive can become Africanized in a 3-week period. And that is, she goes on a mating flight, and from one mating flight, this is absolutely ridiculous. She emits a pheromone, and 2 or 3 dozen drones will catch up with her, will smell that from a mile away, catch up with her and mate with her. Let's hit that next slide. This gets a little more interesting at some point here. They'll mate with her, all right? She'll mate with a few dozen of them. It occurs in flight, and the male dies each time. This is a little graphic, so shield your eyes. This is what happens after he mates with her. Go a little further with that motion. Oh, it's over. It's bye-bye. Yeah, he literally dies, and sometimes they fall to the ground, and she has to kick Loverboy's carcass off and go up and do it again. It's romantic as hell. So if your European queen goes on a mating flight, she mates with these Africanized drones, she comes back and starts laying Africanized eggs, and in 3 weeks, that's how long it takes for those to start hatching, your hive is Africanized. So there is no winning with these things, and every single time, these Africanized honeybees are better at everything. So wherever you have an Africanized feral hive, and you don't keep a real close eye on your backyard hive, they will become Africanized, period. It's next to impossible to keep them from becoming Africanized. Also, Africanized hives swarm more often. So all this propagating area with bees, 10 or 20% of the bees take off, they'll find a new place to live. With the European honeybees, still invasive, they would do that 5 or 6 times a year. Yeah, no, these guys, Africanized hives will swarm 30 times a year per hive. That's for every hive, you've got 30 new hives. It's just science fiction in the worst possible way. So why the hell are they so aggressive? Of course, we have no idea why. It's in the genetics. We do know that they adapt and they change. Dark clothing. Well, everybody knows beekeepers wear white. There's a reason for that, because in nature, even in Europe, Asia, and Africa, natural enemies of honeybees are dark furry things. So they attack dark furry things. So this is why beekeepers wear white. They will, it's been really shown with Africanized bees, like I said, they're better at everything, including attacking and killing. They will attack dark clothing much more readily. But it's all pheromone oriented, so once that attack pheromone is released into the air, all bets are off about everything. Once that attack pheromone, it's like the alarm going off in the submarine, the ooh horn. Once that goes up. But the initial attack, they go for the CO2 coming out of your nose and mouth. That's verified. I've done experiments where I'll have a tube inside my suit, down from my mouth to my boot with a screen on the end, and they'll attack my boot. So they go for the CO2 coming out of your nose and mouth, which is why you don't jump into water, because it'll follow your bubbles. They'll track the CO2. All right. Of course, vibrations. Who hasn't seen or heard of a weed whacker getting attacked? They hate them damn things. And now they're every week they're attacking weed whackers in the summer at 100 yards away. 100 yards, football field away. Vibrations, CO2, bad sense of humor? No, really. I mean, I try to tell them jokes all the time. They don't like it. Of course, I'm in a bee suit. I don't care. Fragrance. They hate smells. They hate absolutely everything. There are only 3 things that they hate that they do not attack. Everything else they hate that they attack that we can figure out. The 3 things are bleach, vinegar, and these pheromones, the other pheromones that we use. Pheromones are just smells. There's millions of them. And so we have a pheromone that we use that repels them. Those are the only 3 things. Everything else they hate, they'll attack. Diesel, whatever it may be. So the stinging, of course, queen bee can sting. A lot of people think that she can't, but she can. But it's under extreme duress. She don't want to because there's only one of them. And the workers, of course, can and will sting you, and they are kamikaze. They are total
kamikaze. But they are also the only Hymenoptera that has a barbed stinger on it. And Kathy has an extremely cool video that we're going to see in a little while here about that, about how the stinger actually works in the human hide, in the human flesh. All other bees, as in wasps, hornets, bumblebees, etc., do not have barbs on their stingers, and that's why they can sting you over and over again. So back to the pheromones, of course, and the pheromones, what is really interesting about this, and this all came from being in the field and realizing this, is when you get stung that first time, it sends that pheromone to the rest of the hive that you're the intruder, and you are the target. But on top of that, you cannot wash that pheromone off your skin. It's subcutaneous. It goes into your bloodstream. So for up to a week, depending on your metabolism, you're marked. And of course, the more you get stung, the worse, because you have more of that venom in you. The venom that contains the pheromone, the attack pheromone. So, like I said, it just keeps going from worse to worse. This is total sci-fi about the whole thing. You can't wash it off. All right, so when they, of course, work outside the hive, they do everything better, like I said. Now, European hive will work a 2-mile radius area from their hive to forage what they need. They're Vikings and hoarders, they take more, and they will work that area. So if you could keep your bees in your backyard, like your Rottweiler or your Chihuahua or whatever, that'd be awesome, but you can't. And this is why a backyard beekeeper is helping destroy a 2-mile radius. Now it's 3 with the Africanized, because they're better and they do everything more. So they need a 3-mile radius. And of course they're looking for 4 things. They collect 4 things out in the field. Water, of course. Everybody thinks it's just nectar and pollen. No, that's 2 of them, nectar and pollen, but also, about this time of year, tree sap from evergreens. And they bring that back and turn that into propolis, which is the glue that holds the hive together. So after any hive extermination, and now we're kind of getting into more pertinent stuff when you guys show up on the scene, and unfortunately for a stinging incident, you've got 2 types of bees that are left over from any hive removal. And as you'll see on our YouTube channel or any of our other presentations that we have, our videos, we talk about this extensively, because this is science fiction for the customer especially, and for many first responders and medical personnel. So after any removal, you've got bees still flying around from your hive that you removed. Those are called remnant bees because they're leftovers. They're leftovers of that hive. All right, they come back to where their old front door was. That's all they know. They can't even go anywhere else. Every hive is an enemy of every other hive. The only reason they visit each other is to steal honey. Yeah, they're all total Vikings. So the remnant bees are going to come back and they will die off. They cannot go, they're like, the analogy I use is they're like an amputated limb. You can live without your finger, but your finger cannot live without you. And so those bees cannot go start their own hive. Just like your finger can't go start a new human. Those bees can't go join another hive. Just like your finger can't go join another human. They're all enemies of each other. So they are collateral damage. They will die off over the next week or so. When it's cold out and it freezes every night, it makes us look really good because they die off quicker. Now the second reason that you have bees farting around for a while is this is very fascinating, in a 3-mile radius, all of the beehives know about each other. It's like an HOA from hell. In case they can steal honey from each other. That's the only reason. So you've got robber bees, okay, remnants and robbers. The robber bees are coming from neighboring hives because they know that hive is there. They love to steal some honey, but the guard bees at the entrance to those hives, their only job is to repel a threat, and most of the time that's neighboring hives. They can smell different to each other. So you got remnants and robbers. Remnant bees never used to be aggressive. Now they can be for up to 2 weeks. Robber bees are not aggressive. They're like bees on flowers, foraging bees. If foraging bees and robber bees get aggressive, well, I don't know what we're going to do. Because that would be another turn event. We have been seeing aggressive robber bees and aggressive foraging bees, and man, I don't know what we'll do. We can't have flowers anymore. I mean, it's horrifying what's going on, and it's ongoing. It's changing all the time. So and like it was said in the last one, the remnant bees are surviving for longer and longer. I hope that will continue. So a little bit of a recap. They make twice as much honey. They pollinate better. They swarm more often. They're disease resistant. They're pest resistant.
Yeah, they're a better bee. Unfortunately, they're a deadly invasive species. They're better at everything. That's the problem. We hear this all the time. Well, don't we need them? They're better at pollinating. No, it's quite the opposite. That's the problem. They're driving out our native pollinators. So, of course, now this has changed since we did this, actually, up to 4 miles in a vehicle. No, as you guys probably know, we have a brush truck, fire truck that we use for bee removal, and we were out at the slaughter ranch on the other side of Douglas out there, actually at Kerry Kimbrell's ranch out there, and we had a removal, and there was miles and miles of dirt road with gates and whatnot, and they chased that truck for 10 miles after a bad removal. You can't outrun them. Every week in Cochise County in the summer, they kill a dog, a horse, or a goat. They killed 3 people that we know of this last summer in Cochise County that we know of. It's just getting worse. And so our education of the general public about these bees is going to continue, it's got to continue to become something everyone's going to encounter. Everyone at some point is going to encounter these bees. So they're bigger, of course, and they are so doggone aggressive that once that attack pheromone once they release that attack pheromone in the hive, I've seen them come out of a 1-inch diameter hole at 1,000 per second. Like somebody turn on a high pressure water hose. And of course, when you see a feral hive, now this goes out, of course, to the general public mostly. When someone sees a ball of bees hanging in a tree, or bees coming and going from a hole under a shed, or a knot in a tree, or an entire, or your barbecue grill, they'll live in anything. The main thing is stay away. This is not a rattlesnake in the driveway. You cannot take care of this. You might win once, but you might not. The risks are too high. You've got 100,000 of them in there, and this is a real problem for people, because every day people say there can't be too many. I only see a couple dozen coming out of that hole. Yeah, that's the airport, not the city. That's the loading dock. That's all that is. You can't tell the size of Tucson by looking at a picture of its airport. Same thing with a honeybee hive. You got 100,000 of them little monsters in there that will come pouring out as soon as that threat is perceived. So of course, call a professional. Call a professional. Of course, in Cochise County, you can call us, but call in a professional. This is not a DIY situation. Now this is an interesting little compilation also. Culture Bisbee, someone had a beehive up here they were keeping, and please don't keep these in Arizona. All right. I was just got a damage thing. Is it like, get in, you're not gonna let these bees kill you, get up. This is like you don't have to sit in the back. And so I gotta go sit in the front and my mouth. This is her shit. Oh my God. I hope the lady lives. In the back.
I'm flying around steaming, I'm just, oh my God! Oh no!
Oh my God! Completely cannot eat it.
This man hanging upside down, completely
And that was the most helpless feeling.
There was nothing that could be.
Get stung with crazy.
Bees know where to thrive with their hive.
These guys can light up.
This.
Like a one-handle. Next, we got 5 here. Now, it's interesting because the other couple, right?
Kills them.
He believes this aggressive hybrid is now all over the lower 48.
What's amazing about this kid in Ohio that got stung up by 20,000 plus bees? That's like 40 rattlesnakes, my God.
A couple of weeks ago, this is how they attack dark furry things. This is how we would like to educate people, is hands-on in the field. Don't do this at home, obviously, you guys. If you have a hive on your property in the Southwest, get it removed by professionals. Yeah, the guy that was in there and being very theatrical was not an actor. That was Randy Archuleta, and he almost got killed by these damn things. And it's not a memory for him, it's a scar, that's for sure. So, of course, whenever a hive is discovered, get everyone out of the area. And if you are attacked, if they bounce off of you while you're hiking even, turn around and go back the other way. Most people would say, that, you know, oh, it's a warning shot. No, not with these guys, it's a missed shot. They aren't nice, they aren't out there to warn you. They want to kill you. And so, turn around, go back the way you came. Do not run a zigzag pattern if you're too smart for that. Straight line it. Cover your head and head for cover. That's what I've always had to teach when I'm doing search and rescue, etc. Don't jump into water. We talked about that. And get into a vehicle. I've seen people, guys run right past open doors that they think they got off on them. It's better to be inside of a closed vehicle with a couple hundred than outside with 100,000. All right, so whenever you're talking to people about this, have them try to get into a vehicle, into a house. Now this is the actual law when it comes to what we're talking about. And I helped write this years ago with the state, and it is 36-601. And if you read that second, any condition or a place in populous areas that constitute a breeding place for flies, rodents, mosquitoes, and other insects that are capable of carrying and transmitting disease-causing organisms to any person or persons, or any condition or a place that constitutes a feral colony of honeybees that is not currently maintained by a beekeeper and that poses a health or safety hazard to the public. Legally, if you have a feral hive on your property under a shed, you legally have to have it removed. All right, most people don't know this, but it is. You legally have to remove it. It's a liability issue. So make that clear to people, because you can't, oh, they aren't bothering anybody. We hear it all the time. It drives us nuts. Yeah, legally you have to have it removed because they are an existential threat. Of course, being observant. That's all that this really boils down to. Keep your eyes open. You don't want to step on a rattlesnake either. You know, this is just one more thing to put in our bucket of things to watch out for here in the desert, you know, in the high desert here. They, and also like the last one says, there is no rhyme or reason as to where they will live. It makes no sense at all. So thank you so much, you guys. Really appreciate all of you coming here, and anybody on the live stream. We'd like to thank you guys for watching, and you know, hopefully you learned something and were entertained a bit. I'm going to turn it over to Kathy Childress right now, and she's going to put up her presentation. If anybody would like to take a little bit of a bathroom break, there might be about a 5-minute change over here, and she's got a really cool presentation for medical personnel and everyone else. So thank you so much, everyone. Yeah. You need any help changing that out?
Just gonna unplug it.
Stick with us, Killer Nation. We're going to be back in a second and continue this wonderful presentation. And then afterward, we're going to have a little bit of a Q&A. But stick with us for now.
So I got a question for you. So you said if like a European hive, the queen from that mates with an Africanized bee, and that hive will become Africanized. Once that queen starts to lay like Africanized eggs, do those Africanized bees attack from within to just take over? Or does it just kind of like just kind of repopulates itself?
Can I borrow you for?
That is.
Oh, it's fascinating. I know. Stick with us, Killer Bee Nation. Who we got on? We got a whole bunch. We got everybody on with us?
We got people on.
Yeah, yeah. Stick with us, guys. Anybody got any comments or anything? What do you think about the presentation so far? Let me know when you're ready. Or have you got it up?
No, we're gonna take just a.
Oh, we're going to take a little break here, guys. Have a cookie break. That's what we're doing. We're having a cookie break back there. So thank you so much, you guys, for coming with us on this. This is really, you know, we're going to be doing more of these now. We're going to be educated. This time of year, we're not supposed to have calls on honeybees, but you know we do. and it's gonna continue, and I know that. It's warming up again, we got another warming trend here. But we're gonna be doing these educational things next, is it Tuesday, Leah, or what?
Thursday.
Thursday, Bisbee Fire Department. And then after that, we have Fry Fire here, Sierra Vista. We have Elfrida, Sun Sights, and then a big presentation out at the Desert Museum at Rodeo, New Mexico. That'll be a fun one. We'll definitely live stream that one also. We might not live stream all of them, but we'll see how that goes, depending on where we are and who doesn't mind. But anyway, thank you guys. You're awesome for coming with us. Has anybody got anything to say, Leah? Lois?
They're saying I'm informative.
Thank you.
Good job.
Excellent. A lot of the Killer Bee Nation, of course, is, you heard this stuff before, just maybe not in this format, in this presentation, and not with someone trying to kill us, 100,000 little bastards trying to kill us, right? And so this is more of an educational setting, and I can't wait for you to hear, though, Kathy's presentation, because it's really, really cool. We saw a little bit of it before we got set up. It's awesome. It's just amazing. She's been on stinging incident calls, and she's a nurse here in Benson, and it's personal with her. Let's put it that way, kind of like it is with the three of us. So Hosh and Lois Lane, okay, and me, of course, you know. But who we got on with us, Hosh?
We got Renee. She's
is
checking
Renee
in
at the
from
store?
shop right
Hey,
now.
Renee, get back to work. What are you slacking watching TV? My God, no, Renee is working the store down in Bisbee today. She's on Fridays, Saturdays, and Sundays, and then Leah is up there on Monday. So come down and say hi, Lois. Okay, Lois, for God's sake, Lois Lane. Anyway, hi Renee, how's it going today? Are we selling any honey?
We saw any honey?
Are we selling any honey? Get back to work, Renee. Anyway, we like to have fun with that.
We got the Vikings stocked up now.
Oh, with the
Hopefully
Viking
some
honey's flying out the
Viking.
door then, ain't it? Yes, indeed. Oh, God. So, Hosh, we got the whole family on there?
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, excellent, excellent.
Yep.
Yeah, this is really good that we're delving into this aspect of it with the educational and for CEU, continuing education. Yeah, licensing and whatnot. You guys already know that we do it for the Department of Ag and whatnot, but this is kind of a new branching out situation, and really happy to do it. Really great to have you guys along. Really appreciate you guys coming along with us, because the more you know, a little knowledge is dangerous. A lot of knowledge is pretty damn good. And so we're just hoping that everyone knows everything about these damn things that we know, because it's so pertinent. So I think she's, are we close?
So the next section
All right.
here.
Well, once again, I'm going to introduce Kathy Childress to the podium.
Yeah.
My good friend
Hey,
Kathy.
Kathy.
She, like I said, it's personal with her. These bees are personal. She don't like them.
I had one up my nose.
Yeah, I was
Wow.
saving that. Thank you. I was
Why'd
gonna-
you go and do that?
How'd you go and do that?
I think they wanted to get up close and personal.
Oh, is that what it was?
That's
Oh,
what
is
it
that
was.
what they were? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
what it. Yeah, when you get stung up around here, it's called detox.
Oh.
Okay, all right, already. All right, Killer Bee Nation, I'm going to turn it over to Kathy now. Stick around.
All right. Would you mind keeping the
Oh, sure, of course.
Yeah. So I'm going to leave this slide up here for a little bit. So again, for those of you who are here for your medical CEs, my email address is down below my name there, cchildress@uciaz.com. And that's how you're going to register that you attended this particular presentation. So hopefully you guys can see that.
The microphone a little closer.
A little closer?
Yeah.
All right. So I'm going to be doing the medical portion of the presentation, and this is going to be geared, we're going to give some home remedies, those types of things, and then we'll also get into the advanced treatment of how we treat these things for individuals who go into anaphylactic shock. There we go. All right, you can buzz past the injector, sir.
I heard that. Good one, Kathy.
All right, so why is bee venom potentially lethal or fatal? Most of the time it's from anaphylaxis, okay? It can be from massive envenomation, also from just the amount of stings that individuals can receive. But the vast majority of fatalities come from actual anaphylaxis reactions in patients. So in the research that I did for this presentation, the bee venom from a European bee versus an Africanized bee is no more potent. They all have the same potency, because I guess myself personally, I was also under the impression that because we call them killer bees, that perhaps their venom from the stings was a little bit different than a regular honeybee. It has been scientifically proven not to be. So it's not the venom potency itself that kills, it's actually from the reaction that occurs in the body. All right, so bee envenomation. 50 to 500 stings can cause death in an adult male. And again, when we start talking about body mass, and you'll see down on the bottom right, children are way more susceptible than our adults. Think about their body mass and the amount of envenomation. So if you or I get 50 stings, our body is way bigger to handle those toxins. However, a child who gets 50 stings, that venom, because their body mass is so much smaller, is going to be way more dangerous to them than it is for an adult male, for example. The other statistic that I found is that most deaths occur in older adults with cardiovascular disease. And there are some issues that go along with that venom. So for all you science geeks out there, this is what bee venom actually consists of. Now for me, the ones that I really paid attention to was down in the bottom right-hand corner with histamine, dopamine, and norepinephrine. So for most of you, that probably means quite a bit. So histamine release in the body is a lot of times where we start getting the anaphylaxis reaction and what we're going to be geared towards treating. So when we talk about anaphylaxis signs and symptoms, when we start looking at norepinephrine is a precursor to epinephrine in the body. And for those of you sitting out there, what does epinephrine do to the heart rate? Shoots it up. Okay, so that's one of the signs and symptoms that you're going to see with an individual who is going into anaphylactic shock from bee stings. Okay. One of the things to remember, poison control is a hugely beneficial adjunct to our toolbox out in the field. Even when I was working as a physician assistant in the ER, I had poison control on speed dial. We used it for everything. We used it for rattlesnake bites, we used it for brown recluse bites, we used it for bee bites or bee stings, we used it for a lot of things. They can be a huge resource to you, and they actually sent me out a flyer on responding to massive bee envenomation. So they come out and do presentations also on treatment of bee stings. So if you're interested in having poison control come out to your community and doing some education, they are available to that, and they want to be able to make sure to pass that along. Removal of stingers. So Reed talked about this a little bit, but I do have a PowerPoint or a little video that kind of goes into it and explains it pretty nicely.
When a bee rips her stinger off into your flesh, muscles continue digging and continue pumping venom long after she's gone. Here's what that stinger looks like close up. Here's what the tip of a stinger looks like. This is how it digs as it moves. It's made of 3 parts, a stabilizing rod down the middle, and 2 barbed digging blades called lancets. As those lancets move back and forth, pumps inside the venom bowl squirt venom into the wound until the venom sac up top is completely emptied out, or the muscles give up, or the stinger jams and breaks, whichever happens first. If you want to learn more about this, there is a full-length video on the Stated Clearly YouTube channel. Check it out.
All right, I just thought that was a really cool demonstration of what an actual microscopic look at a stinger is, because most of us don't want to miss long enough to see that happening. So a couple things you need to know about when you get a bee sting. First of all, one of the first things you want to do is get the stinger out. Okay, the quicker you can get it out from the sting, the less venom you're going to get. Now, a lot of people go, oh man, I gotta have a set of tweezers to get those out. And tweezers is the last thing you want to use to remove a stinger. And the reason for that is, think about that little sac there. And if you go ahead and squeeze that sac with your tweezers, you just shot all the venom into your skin before you had a chance to get rid of it. So what the recommendations are is fingernail, you know, a lot of people like use a credit card. I don't know about you, I ain't gonna go digging in my purse for a credit card to use a credit card to scrape it off. Just use your finger, get it scraped off. For first responders, when you have someone who has massive numbers of stings, this is where prioritizing what do you need to do first? What's happening with your patient? Do we get the stingers out first? Do we start treatment? Now hopefully you have enough people in the back of your ambulance that you can be doing multiple things at the same time. But one of the priorities is somebody needs to be getting the stingers out of your patient, because until those stingers are gone, it's going to continue to envenenate the patient, okay? So you have to have somebody hopefully focusing on getting the stingers out, okay? And I'm just going to give you an example of the first Africanized bee attack that I was on last summer here in a local area. I can't give you a lot of details, but this individual had massive numbers of stingers on them. And when you're in the back by yourself, again, you kind of have to prioritize a little bit. Do I need to get medication to this patient? Do I need to get the stingers off? And you kind of have to make those decisions based on the resources that you have available, all right? Some home treatments, some things that you can do at home. Now, it is very interesting when you go online, you're going to get a plethora of, well, this works great, this works great, this works great. There was just so many various treatments that you could do at home. I just chose a couple of them. One of them that seemed to be fairly common was you make a little slurry with baking soda, and so while it's wet, you apply that little slurry over the bee sting, and supposedly what it does is draw some of the venom out of that localized area. One of the things, I used to ride a motorcycle, and I would unfortunately get stung quite often, and so I carried a little kind of kit on the motorcycle with me. It had hydrocortisone cream, and also it had Benadryl cream. And I actually found that the combination of the two creams actually worked really well. Hydrocortisone is a steroid, and so it helps decrease the inflammation. Benadryl is an antihistamine, so you have two different pathways working on that histamine release in that localized area. Or you can actually take Benadryl orally. Okay, but I found for pain-wise, if you can put ice on it, that helps decrease the inflammation to that area. But you want to get, for me, that's what always helped decrease the pain the most, because there's nothing worse than sitting on the side of the road, having just got stung somewhere on your body, and having nothing to help treat that. Also, the baking soda for the slurry. This was a picture that I found on the internet. This is a bus, and I believe it was in Nicaragua, that happened to go off the side of one of those tropical roads, and unfortunately they landed right in the middle of a bee colony. And Reed, you had said a couple people died from this, actually. 8 individuals died, and you see all the little dots in the upper left-hand corner, those are all bee stings. This is where this particular individual, and by the looks of it, it looks like it was a child. They may or may not still be alive, but those are all bee stings. Okay, so you can just see the massive number of attacks from those bees. So when we start talking about signs and symptoms of envenomation, you're going to have localized pain. Now, this may or may not occur before some of the other signs and symptoms of anaphylaxis start showing up. You can have some of your respiratory symptoms show up before hives ever develop. So when we talk about hives, those are those welts. Generally, a lot of people know them as welts or hives or urticaria. That's generally the first reaction that you're going to get. One of the other localized is angioedema. And I'm going to show you some pictures of what angioedema looks like. Angioedema can be very scary looking, and it can be very scary because that can become a huge airway issue. When you start having some of the systemic effects from the toxins from the venom, you can have nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, intestinal, or uterine cramping. Okay, remember what the uterus is. It's a great big muscle. You can get muscle cramping anywhere in your body, including the uterus for females. All right, more severe systemic reactions, you can start getting wheezing or bronchoconstriction of the lungs, and that's where we run into huge issues, and we'll talk about how we treat those out in the field. Laryngeal edema is actual swelling of the vocal cords that can close off the opening to the trachea. And then shock is more of a vascular, so the patient becomes hypotensive or their blood pressure plummets. We'll talk about how we treat that as well. Not everything that is an anaphylactic reaction occurs immediately. However, in general, if someone's going to have an anaphylactic reaction, it's going to be within the first hour. But you can have a delayed systemic reaction from 8 to 24 hours. And this can show up as renal failure, you can have hematologic or blood issues, you can start having neurological complications, which is mainly altered mental status. They can have some balance issues as well. And mechanisms of some of these complications are poorly understood. Recognition of anaphylaxis, especially for us as first responders out in the field, is huge. And most of us have been very well trained on how to recognize the signs and symptoms of anaphylactic shock. It's pretty much the same as any other shock. The only difference with anaphylaxis is generally you have some type of cutaneous or skin type eruption that generally occurs first. So you're going to have flushing, pruritus, urticaria, and again, I've got some pictures here to show you of those. They may not, again, I talked about a little bit earlier, they may not show up, that urticaria may not show up until after they start having some of their respiratory symptoms, or some of their tachycardia, or some of their hypotension, or fast heart rate, okay? With the airway, a lot of times patients will describe, I've got a lump in my throat, okay? And I'll show you why. I've actually got some pictures of what's happening internally down by the opening of the airway with that edema, or that swelling down towards the airway. If they start having a persistent clearing of their throat, that can be an indication that they're starting to have some narrowing of that airway, difficulty breathing, hoarseness. Okay, again, think about those vocal cords. If you're starting to have swelling down in the vocal cords, one of the first things you're going to have is a change in their voice quality. So really pay attention because a lot of times I'll ask patients if they're starting to sound a little hoarse, I'm like, do you normally sound like this? You know, and that's a really good question. And they're like, no, I don't usually sound like this. You better start acting very quickly because things are going downhill rapidly. Stridor is a narrowing of that upper airway, and that's usually more kind of a high-pitched, I don't want to call it a wheeze because wheezes generally come from the lungs, but it's a narrowing of that upper airway. Cardiovascular, generally we're going to see tachycardia, which is an elevated heart rate. We're going to see that blood pressure decrease, and along with all of those things, decreased cardiac output. Okay, and again, most fatalities occur within the first hour. So I put this up for those of you who here in Arizona use the T3Gs or the treatment, triage treatment and transport guidelines. I wanted to put this in this presentation just as kind of a nice little review. We're going to talk about all of these medications here in a little bit. So this is for anaphylaxis, and this is for shock. Again, just a little bit of a review of some of the signs and symptoms. And for those of you out in the general public, also, these are some things to be aware of. If you have been stung by a bee and you start having any of these symptoms, you better call 911. And for a lot of people, they already know that they have allergies to bees and typically carry an EpiPen with them. Epinephrine is life-saving. And that's why that when we get a patient out in the field who is in anaphylaxis, then epinephrine is our first line medication to treat that. And we'll talk a little bit about why. So these are just all the different signs and symptoms that you can have as you may be progressing towards anaphylactic shock. So here's just some different pictures of the differences in the different ways that urticaria or hives can present. Some of them are very red, some of them you can barely see. They can be on any part of the body, okay? It's not just necessarily where they got stung at, but let's say you got stung on the arm. As us as first responders, we need to be looking everywhere on the body to see where they might be developing hives at, okay? So it's not just where they got stung at, okay? This next picture, this is what we call angioedema. All right, now let's take a look at especially over on the right, right upper and right lower. Can that be potentially an airway issue? Huge airway issue, okay? And this literally is how big their tongues can get, okay? You can see in this middle lower, you can get swelling on just one side of the tongue. And angioedema can be very, very interesting, all right? I like this bottom left-hand picture because it also involves the hands. You can get angioedema on the face, neck, hands, feet. You can get it in various places of your body. But it's interesting to watch this gal, how she goes from this is her normal picture to hard to recognize that it's the same person due to the angioedema. Okay. Treatment. So one of the things that I wanted to stress, and it's something that we never ever really talk about, is when we go on a call, let's say for example, somebody now has anaphylaxis, they've never been stung by a bee before, they have no clue that they're allergic to bees. And this may sound stupid, but it is important for us to bring the bee specimen with us, okay? Because what that's going to do, or at minimum get several pictures of the insect that they got stung by. This is going to be hugely important for the allergist in the future. So after this person has had an initial anaphylactic reaction, it is important for us to dig out the little bee and take the little bugger with us, okay? Because oftentimes people don't know the difference between a bee or a wasp, okay? And there's different types of bees, as Rita had talked about. So please, if you can, if it is still in the general vicinity, bring it with you, okay? All right, so now we're actually going to get into the ALS emergency treatment, and for those EMTs in the state that have your STRs, you guys are able to give epinephrine. So let's talk a little bit about what anaphylaxis does. So from a vasculature standpoint or a blood vessel standpoint, the alpha-1 receptors is what causes vasodilation. So when our blood vessels get big and huge and all that other stuff, what happens to our blood pressure? It tanks, okay? So what epinephrine does is it actually goes after those smooth muscles that that encompass those blood vessels, and it actually helps them vasoconstrict down so that our blood pressure can go back up again, our cardiac output goes out, all those things. Beta-1 effects, always remember beta-1 and beta-2. Beta-1 affects the heart, beta-2 is the lungs. You have one heart, you have two lungs. Okay, that's an easy way to remember beta-1 and beta-2 effects. So adrenaline helps increase the heart rate if the heart rate happens to be slow. And the beta-2 effects on the lungs, remember what happens in anaphylaxis, you get that bronchoconstriction, those muscles around those bronchioles start constricting down, narrowing down those airways. I don't like microphones. Narrowing down those airways, and so what epinephrine does is it goes after those smooth muscles, helps those smooth muscles relax, open up those airways again so your patient can breathe. Okay, because also what builds up in the bronchioles is mucus, so it helps decrease some of that mucus. Epinephrine is our first line and it is life-saving. Okay, so always remember, if you have a patient that has anaphylaxis, all these other medications that I have listed up here are secondary to epinephrine. All right, we can repeat epinephrine every 3 to 5 minutes. Epinephrine naturally occurs in our body. It doesn't last very long. And so you may have to repeat doses of that. All right, some other things that you can give, IV fluid resuscitation, and these are not necessarily in order. So if you have somebody that has low blood pressure, what should be your next treatment? It should be IV fluids to get that blood pressure up. The other thing that you can do to help open up the lungs is give albuterol. Again, the albuterol is a beta-2. It goes after those smooth muscles, helps relax the musculature, helps open up those airways so your patient can breathe better. Now, we're going to talk about corticosteroids And they are actually, they're not an emergency or a rescue medication, but what they're going to do is if you can get them on board early, they're going to help prevent some of those what we call rebound effects of the potential anaphylaxis. So it is important to get corticosteroids on board. Now, H1 and H2 agonists, these are our Benadryls, diphenhydramine. They are histamine antagonists, and part of what causes anaphylaxis is the histamine release. As you kind of saw, histamine was a part of the B-ban. There is, I'm just going to say, there's controversy on how effective the diphenhydramines or the H1 medications are in the treatment of anaphylaxis. We always give it, and that's one of the first things that if someone calls in to 911 and says, I'm having an anaphylactic reaction, epi is going to be the first thing, but then they're also going to tell them to take diphenhydramine or Benadryl. So, but does it really do anything? I don't know. Like I said, the research says it's debatable. Now, for those of you who are ALS and paramedics, the bottom right-hand corner, early intubation to protect that airway is huge, okay? These airways can swell shut very, very quickly, and if you need to get an endotracheal tube into your patient, you need to make that decision very quickly. It's kind of like with burns. If you have a patient that has had flash burns to their face and their voice is already hoarse, that gives you a pretty good indicator that they've got laryngeal edema going on, and you may have one shot to get an endotracheal tube down there, okay? Same thing with anaphylaxis. They really promote early intubation if needed, okay? So this is just a picture. If you were looking down the throat, and the opening in the center of what you're looking at here is where the vocal cords are at. So you can kind of see the progression of the swelling of the airway and why it is so super important to get early intubation if needs be, all right? And so you can see this first picture on the left, 25% obstruction versus 90% obstruction. And on the next one. This is a picture of the laryngeal edema. On the left is normal vocal cords. You, me, anybody sitting here right now, this is what our vocal cords look like. And as the air passes through there, that's what makes noise. So on the right, vocal cords in laryngeal edema, and it is a complete blockage. Does it look like there's any air getting through there? Okay, nope. Bronchoconstriction. So on the left is a picture of a normal bronchial in the lung, where airway is flowing through there. And then on the right is what happens with anaphylaxis, where you start getting that bronchoconstriction, you get narrowing of the airway, you get inflammation, you get mucus, and that's why people have a hard time breathing when they're having an anaphylactic reaction. All right, now we're going to start getting into some of the meds. Epinephrine, like I said, this is your first line, and you may have to repeat it every 3 to 5 minutes. So for an adult, 0.3 to 0.5 milligrams IM, okay? Do we, in anaphylaxis, do we ever give epinephrine IV for the initial anaphylactic? We don't. You want to give it IM. Where do we give it? Thigh, okay? Anterior lateral thigh or up in the deltoid. The reason you want to give it into the thigh, it's a big muscle, it's going to metabolize quickly, it's going to get into the bloodstream and into the system very quickly. The smaller the muscle, it'll still get into the bloodstream like a deltoid muscle up here on the arm, but you want to pick as big a muscle as you can, and for most people, that's going to be their thigh, all right? Pediatrics, 0.01 milligram per kilo IM, again, anterior lateral thigh to a maximum of 0.3 milligrams. And for those of you, again, who are following the T3Gs, I took these straight off of the T3G guidance. So if you are from a different agency, you need to follow your local agency protocols with all of these. But right now, what I'm doing is referencing the T3Gs. IV fluid resuscitation, either normal saline or lactated ringers. Either is going to be fine. Generally, your first bolus, just as a reminder, is going to be 30 mLs per kilo. You may need to repeat that, but these are patients you're going to be reassessing vitals every 5 minutes or more, depending on what condition they're in. Albuterol, again, this is going to go towards the bronchioles, relaxing those smooth muscles that are constricting down on the bronchioles. But the epinephrine will help relax those muscles as well. Albuterol does the same thing. For us, our dosage for adult and pediatrics is 5 milligrams. Can you do nebulized albuterol continuously? Yes, you can. All right. Same with asthma. If you have someone who is in status asthmaticus, you can give back-to-back them treatments to try to break that bronchoconstriction that's going on in the lungs. Okay. Push dose epi. This is where you may need to switch over if your patient is really going down the tubes, down the anaphylaxis pathway, and they're now in shock. You may need to do push dose epi. And just for a review, how you mix that is you're going to take a 10 ml flush. You're going to push out 1 ml of normal saline. You are going to drop 1 ml of your code epi, your 1 to 10,000 epinephrine, because the concentration we're going for is 10 to 20 mics per ml, and you can give 1 to 2 mLs or 10 to 20 micrograms of epinephrine every couple minutes for hypotension. Now, if you are now switching over and treating you with epi IV, and this is where check with your medical direction. Are you going to still be giving IM epi? Probably not. Okay, but make sure and check. Okay, because otherwise you're going to be double dosing on the epinephrine. But this is when we switch over to the IV epinephrine, is when you are now switching over and treating more on the shock end of things. Okay. Corticosteroids, we carry 2. The first one is dexamethasone, 0.6 milligram per kilo, IV, IM, IO, or PO. Everybody always raises an eyebrow when I say PO. When I worked in the ER, we had grenadine, which I understand is used for certain alcoholic drinks to make it pink. But we kept grenadine in the ER. We would draw up the IV dexamethasone, squirt it into a little bit of grenadine, and have the kiddos chug it down, and they loved it. Okay, so that's one way that you can give it PO. They can drink it directly out of the vial that you're carrying it. Okay, methylprednisolone is 2 milligrams per kilo, IV or IM. Notice, and I'm not sure why, but this one does not have the IV or PO dosing, or IO or PO dosing on it like the dexamethasone does. I'm a huge fan of dexamethasone. I think it works better, especially for pediatrics. We use dexamethasone almost exclusively. We tended to use salmeterol more for adults. So your max dose of your salmeterol is 125 milligrams. So your histamine antagonist, the only one that we carry is Benadryl IV. And again, its efficacy is being debated in anaphylaxis, but go ahead and give it anyway because it's in our arsenal. Okay, so you're going to do 1 milligram per kilo, IV, IM, or PO, max dose of 50. And I'm going to be honest, for most adults, you're just going to go ahead and drop the 50, and you're going to give that IV. Alrighty. Any questions? Awesome. Reed, would you like to say anything before we sign off? Thank you, everyone.
Yeah, thank you so much, Kathy. Thank you. Anybody have any questions? What's the best thing to do when you encounter killer bees? Run! That's about all you can do, you know. Anyway, Killer Bee Nation, thank you so much for joining us with this. This has been a great, thank you so much, Kathy. And a very amazing presentation. Well, Killer Bee Nation, we're going to be doing it again in a few days with the Bisbee Fire Department coming along with us. And of course, any bee calls we get, we're bringing you with us. Yeah, you don't get to wear a bee suit either. So tough. We do. Yeah, you get to sit and watch. Oh well, whatever. We love you guys. Thanks so much for joining us. Yeah, more coming, as you well know. Go to killerbeeguy.com and get some honey. Do it now. Okay, do it again. Thank you. Anyway, this is Reed Booth signing off. I'd like to thank Hosh and Leah for manning the IT stuff, and we'll be back. We love you guys. See you later.
Can you answer one question?
Oh, we got one
We
question.
do. For those of us who enjoy exercise walking, can we protect ourselves with anything? What about bees on our hummingbird feeders?
Okay, the walking. Oh man, you know those little mosquito net things you can get at Walmart that you can put over your hat? They've actually saved people's lives. They wad up real small, and if you're out hiking and you do, if your bee bounces off of you, if you have the presence of mind, you're not going to take off your backpack and dig around to find the damn thing. If you're getting stung, you're going to turn around and run. And so it's a real problem. It's a real issue. But those little nets, I mean, sometimes just wear one. It's a good fashion statement too. It looks great, So you could just wear one all the time, all your shopping. Just do it. But preventative, preventative. Anyway, it's a real problem. Hummingbird feeders. Oh, it's an open bar, for God's sake. There is no way to get them to stay away. There really isn't. I played with this idea of putting like oil around the little things, but then I realized oil and feathers don't go together. So don't do that. The only thing you can really do is take the damn bar down, and the bees are so doggone smart. Who doesn't love an open bar? They will come back to where that hummingbird feeder was for up to a week, hovering around waiting for you to bring it back. Yeah, so really, it's a real pain, I know. Take it down, leave it down. The hummers are supposed to go south in the winter anyway, all right? Anybody got anything else for us?
That's it.
Love you guys. We will talk to you very soon. Reed Booth buzzing off. Catch you guys later. Thank you.
Thank you.
Nothing but fun. If it ain't fun, we ain't gonna do it.